Hello, this is Thomas Catmon back for Peacemakers of the World Unite. Now, I believe it was Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto who coined the phrase, workers of the world unite. It's our intention here to borrow that phrase but turn it on its head, because when he called for the workers of the world to unite, he was referring, of course, to a class struggle. And that class struggle in his political philosophy was conceived as being completed through a violent overthrow by one class of another. So eventually the dispossessed class would rise up against those who owned the productive assets, the capital and the land and so on, and violently overthrow them because they could see that their class interests were at odds with this other class's interests. And by overthrowing them, they could somehow then institute a utopia, an ideal state. Well, we know that doesn't work in practice. And the reason there's a fundamental flaw with that is that it's predicated on a conflict without any hope of a solution. The conflict here is between two classes. So when we say peacemakers of the world unite, it sounds somewhat revolutionary, but it is not a violent revolution. If you like, it's a kind of non-violent revolution. Because every type of revolution is a protest against the status quo, against the establishment. And generally speaking, it's hatched because one group of people believe that another group of people are their undying, implacable enemy. And we don't just see this in the class struggle. We see this war going on between the genders as well, between the sexes, males and females. Now, of course, there's a difference there, but if you're talking about, let's say, a radical feminist perspective, that perspective may conceive a necessary conflict between the interests of males and the interests of females, such that males will always try to dominate females, and so the females are engaged in a battle to the end with males. Obviously, this is a less than ideal situation, but you have to ask yourself, is it even true? Is there a necessary conflict between the male and the female, between one class of society and another, between one ethnic group and another? To what extent are these conflicts that tear away at the body politic engineered conflicts? Are they engineered, or are they just hardwired into the system because that's reality? Is there an oppressive patriarchy that holds everyone else in abeyance? It's important to understand one's first principles, to be very conscious and deliberate in calibrating one's paradigm. Does your paradigm set up one group against another as being necessarily conflicted, not just for a term, but forever? Because if it does, then the only thing that counts in social and political life is the power struggle. And whoever holds the power will dictate the narrative. You need to ask yourself, do you believe that? Some people think of or describe this way of thinking as cultural Marxism. Some people throw around loosely the phrase identity politics. But cultural Marxism might be a bit closer to the mark, in that the original Marxism, classical Marxism, was purely based on a clash of economic interests. There was one class of people who didn't own, didn't possess, and they had the terms dictated to them by another class of people who were the owners. And it was all to do with political economy. The real revolution and change would rise up from a forced change in economic relations. But by the time in the 20th century, especially in the latter part of the 20th century, this whole power struggle paradigm morphs into a much more variegated set of possibilities. It's no longer simply denominated in economic terms. Any oppressed or marginal group is now engaged in a power struggle with a dominant group. It may be an ethnic minority against an ethnic majority within a given state. It may be immigrants against the native born. It may be those of a certain sexual orientation locked in mortal battle with those of another sexual orientation. It may be a battle over reproductive rights, so-called. So, last time we talked about the benefits of being upfront and acknowledging the existence of conflict. There's certainly an advantage in not denying the existence of conflict, because unless you can own it, you can't begin the process of conflict resolution. And it is the commitment to that process of conflict resolution, conscious conflict resolution, that makes us peacemakers and peace educators. Peace education comes first, because if we can understand these dynamics, and if we can understand that the template for solving a problem between two individuals is essentially the same template for solving a problem between two states or two civilizations, we can follow the same processes of resolution. And as I suggested last time, I've only hinted at it so far, we haven't fully ventilated the issue, but those processes can't involve the deeply problematic issue of projection. We have to be vigilant against it, because as soon as one side of an issue dehumanises the other side, calling it subhuman or subhuman scum, there's all sorts of opprobrium that can be poured on any side. As soon as they believe that their opponent is not open to reason, because they don't have the same human sensibilities and reactions that I do, that we do, that there'll be an inevitable dehumanisation and therefore demonisation of the opponent. And if you start off that playing field, it's impossible to practice conflict resolution. You will in fact be practicing conflict perpetuation. It leads to more and more polarisation. And the world is more polarised than ever, according to a lot of analysts. Okay. Children against parents, males against females, marriages breaking up. The United States of America has been described as some as perpetually on the brink of civil war, that the divisions that were there during the Civil War, they may be manifesting in another form, but it's almost like you've got a polarised country. They are not the United States, but they are the divided states of America. And I think that people on either side of the struggle would agree with that. Whether they're Democrat voters or Republican voters, they must all be conscious of the heightened polarisation in that country. Last time we also touched on the fact that religion can be part of the problem, or it can be part of the solution. Religion is meant to deliver peace. Our religious and spiritual traditions should come to our aid if we are peacemakers, ideally. When they don't, it's because human beings, rather than being guided by the religion, are instrumentalizing the religion and cherry picking what they want from the Holy Scriptures and weaponizing it to force their will onto the world, and not for a holy purpose, I might add, but usually for something pretty base and carnal, as we've all seen around us. It could be for terror. It could be for subjecting populations. It could be for different types of oppression. But to see the fruitfulness of religion, or to see the dividend, there have to be the right conditions. There needs to be religious freedom. Now, this does not mean the freedom for some religions to persecute other religions. It's a very complex picture when you look around the globe. Sometimes it would seem that the religious folk are a persecuted minority, There may be places in Africa where people of a certain religion are being persecuted, or places in Asia. We've seen trouble between the Burmese Buddhists and the Rohingya Muslims. People are concerned about persecution there. In communist China, people are concerned about persecution of Uyghur Muslims or Christians or Falun Gong practitioners. But the lesson to draw is not that it's a simple case of religious people good, non-religious people bad. Yes, people who reject the Creator have done a lot of bad in the world, but they're not all bad. And people who pay lip service to the Creator have done atrocities as well. It's a variegated pattern, as I say. Sometimes it's religious people attacking other religious people. The Baha'is, for example, have complained for a long time about attacks on them by Shia in Iran. Shia would be attacked by perhaps Sunni in other areas, as with the outbreaks of the ISIS rampage, the Islamic State. We can see the trouble in Gaza at the moment that is screaming out for some understanding and some healing. And we can see that the temptation to weaponize religion has become almost irresistible on all sides. So it's more important to get off the holy war bandwagon and get onto the holy peace bandwagon. And I encourage adherents of any religion or ideology or philosophy, way of life, because some systems are better styled as philosophies or ways of life, like Taoism, Confucianism. I'd encourage them all to demonstrate to the world how these traditions have inspired you to make peace in your communities and in your world.